I'm starting to work with Atlas and the saddle pad. So I've got my start button cone here. So he's going to touch his nose to this cone and then I'll present the pad. So he's got to do that first before I'll bring the pad. And then he touches the pad and I'll click and reinforce. So this gives him a little bit more control over the session. He wanted to kind of sniff on the mounting block here. So he got a little distracted. So trying to put him back on the cone. There we go. And then I'll present the pad. And he's a little bit more interested in the cone there. So then he kind of looks at the pad. I'll click and reinforce him. Touches the cone, bring the pad up. When he touches the pad with his nose, then I'm going to click and reinforce. And then I'm going to kind of work my way back to his back. And he kept wanting to look at this, so I'm just going to go ahead and put the cone up there since he already had some interest in the mounting block. And so he doesn't have to put his head down quite as much either. So same thing, he touches the start button, the cone, and then I bring in the pad, and then I click and reinforce. And I kind of brought it a little bit past his head now, and then a little bit further, so it's kind of on his cheek, and I'm not touching him with it. I'm holding it next to his face, and then he's bringing his cheek to the pad. So that's another way, besides the start button, to make sure that they're not super afraid of it, because he has the choice to touch it or not. I'm not going to touch him with it. So that really builds their confidence with it. And then I'm just going to work my way back toward his back. So on his neck here, just kind of repeating that process, waiting for him to touch the cone first. Now we're on the shoulder. And I do where he's touching the pad from his face down his neck, and then once I get to the shoulder, then I'll start touching him with it. Since we've already gone through all the steps, I can teach him to target his shoulder and his hips and his belly to things, but at this point I just wanted him with those first few touches to make sure that he felt in control with it, and then once it gets past the shoulder, then I will be touching him with it. So he touches his cone, I'm going to touch him with it, click while the pad is on him, and then take it away and feed and then reset until he touches that cone again. Same process, a little bit further back, and I'm again reading his body language the whole time. If he's not if he's not feeling comfortable and he looks tense, then I'll go back a step. If he looks nice and relaxed, I'll just keep going. And I just want to kind of touch all over his body and make sure he's cool with the pad just in general. And then I'll start placing on his back and then adding duration so that I can have it on his back for longer and longer amounts of time. So, and his cone fell down, but I just want to make sure he's cool with the saddle pad first, even if I'm not going to obviously put the saddle pad on his hindquarters or his legs, but I want him to make sure that he can be touched with it anywhere. And I love his body language. His neck's nice and level and low. He's touching the cone really slowly. Unfortunately, I'm kind of in the way. And he's not really moving his head before or afterwards. That's good. He's not like touching the cone and then pulling his head up really quickly. And he's not pushing his head down to touch that really quickly either. So that time I'm just going to touch him on the shoulder and then kind of pretend drop the pad, because that's going to be part of it too, is going to be kind of having the pad on there. And then if it were to blow off or fall off, I want to make sure that that's totally cool with him and reinforce that, because I do want to put this on his back and the pad is going to fall off it sometimes, and I don't want that to be terrifying when it happens. So he touches the cone, I put it on his shoulder, have him touch it, and then I drop it and I'm clicking as that happens.